welcome to another one of my videos. Bear with me, this video will share information on a variety of different topics that I hope you find beneficial, and different practices and teachings of the Buddha and life. So hope you guys enjoy. Like, subscribe, comment down below, let me know what you think. Please remember that a sutra or a dharma talk is not insight in and of itself. It is a means of presenting insight using words and concepts. When you use a map to get to Paris, once you have arrived, you can put the map away and enjoy being in Paris. If you spend all your time with your map, if you get caught by the words and notions presented by the Buddha, you'll miss the reality. The Buddha said many times, "My teaching is like a finger pointing to the moon. Do not mistake the finger for the moon." Be mindful and cultivate. After calming, the third function of shamatha is resting. Suppose someone standing along a river throws a pebble in the air and it falls down into the river. The pebble allows itself to sink slowly and reach the riverbed without any effort. Once the pebble is at the bottom, it continues to rest, allowing the water to pass by. When we practice sitting meditation, we can allow ourselves to rest just like that pebble. We can allow ourselves to sink naturally into the position of sitting, resting without effort. We have to learn the art of resting, allow our body and mind to rest. If we have wounds in our body or mind, we have to rest so they can heal themselves. Calming allows us to rest, and resting is a precondition for healing. My dharma is the practice of non-practice. Practice in a way that does not tire you out, but gives your body, emotions, and consciousness a chance to rest. Our body and mind have the capacity to heal themselves if we allow them to. Stopping, calming, and resting are preconditions for healing. If we cannot stop, the course of our destruction will just continue. The world needs healing. Individuals, communities, and nations need healing. Okay, looking deeply requires courage. You can use a pencil and paper if you'd like. During sitting meditation, if you see clearly a symptom of your suffering, write it down. Then ask yourself, what kinds of nutriments have I been ingesting that have fed and sustained this suffering? When you begin to realize the kinds of the nutrients you have been ingesting, you may cry. Use the energy of mindfulness all day long to be truly present, to embrace your suffering like a mother holding her baby. As long as mindfulness is there, you can stay with the difficulty. Practice does not mean using only your own mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. You also have to benefit from the mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom of friends on the path and your teacher. There are things that even a child can see, but we ourselves cannot see because we are imprisoned by our notions. If you sit with a friend and speak openly, determined to discover the roots of your suffering, eventually you will see them clearly, but if you keep your suffering to yourself, it might grow bigger every day. Just seeing the causes of your suffering lessens your burden. Sariputra, one of the Buddha's great disciples, said, "When something takes place, if we look at it deeply in the heart of reality, seeing its source in the food that nourishes it, we are already on the path of liberation. When we are able to identify our suffering and see its causes, we will have more peace and joy, and we are already on the path to liberation." In the second stage of the second noble truth, encouragement, we see clearly the real happiness is possible if we can stop ingesting the nutrients that cause us to suffer. If we know that our body is suffering because of the way we eat, sleep, etc., we vow to eat, work in ways that are healthier. We encourage ourselves to put an end to the causes of our suffering. Only by a strong intention not to do things in the same way can keep the wheel in motion. Mindfulness is the energy that can help us stop. We investigate the kinds of nutriments, mindfulness of indigestion, protecting our body and mind, protecting our families, Sangha, and environment is important topics for us to discuss. We direct our intention towards our suffering. We see our potential for happiness. We see the nature of suffering and the way out. That is why the Buddha called suffering a holy truth. When we use the word suffering, in Buddhism, we mean the kind of suffering that can show us the way out. There are many practices that can help us face our suffering, including mindful walking, mindful breathing, sitting and eating, mindful looking and listening. One mindful step can take us deep into the realization of beauty and joy in us and around us. Tran Tai Tong, a great meditation master of the 13th century Vietnam, said, "With every step you touch the ground of reality. If you practice mindful walking and deep listening all day long, that is the Four Noble Truths in action. When the cause of suffering has been seen, healing is possible. We vow to refrain from the ingesting foods that make us suffer, and we also vow to ingest foods that are healthy and wholesome, like watering compassionate, positive seeds more and cultivating more than the negative." In the third turning of the wheel, the second noble truth, realization, we vow, but we actually stop ingesting the nutriments to create our suffering. Some people think that to end suffering, you have to stop everything: body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, but that is not correct. The third stage of second noble truth can be described as: when hungry, I eat; when tired, I sleep. When someone has realized this stage, she has a certain lightness and freedom. What she wants to do is fully in accord with the mindfulness trainings, and she does nothing to cause herself or others harm. Let's see here. Suffering no longer arises. This stage is something you can imitate. You have to reach a stage of realization within yourself. When you have a toothache, we know that not having a toothache is happiness, but later we don't have a toothache. We don't treasure our non-toothache. Practicing mindfulness helps us learn to appreciate the well-being that is already there. With mindfulness, we treasure our happiness and can make it last longer. I always ask psychotherapists, why do you only talk to your clients about suffering? Why not help them touch the seeds of happiness that are there? They need to help the patients be in touch with the third noble truth, the cessation of suffering. I encourage them to practice walking meditation, tea meditation with their patients in order to water the seeds of joy in them. Please ask yourself, what nourishes joy in me? What nourishes joy in others? Do I nourish joy in myself and others enough? These are questions about the third noble truth. The cessation of suffering and well-being is available if you know how to enjoy the precious jewels you already have. You have eyes that can see, lungs that can breathe, legs that can walk, lips that can smile, or intentions and a functioning cultivations. When you are understanding, looking deeply at your situation, and find the conditions for happiness that are already there, already available. Be content. When we begin the first stage of the third noble truth, we are already having some happiness, but we are not exactly aware of it. We are free, but we do not know that we are free. Be free and liberate yourself like a bird. When we are young, we are strong and healthy, but don't appreciate it, even if someone tries us otherwise. Okay, before we continue, fake it till you make it. Really cultivate and practice. Okay. This I really resonated with. The second turning is to encourage ourselves to find peace and joy. If you want to garden, you have to bend down and touch the soil. Gardening is a practice, not an idea. To practice the Four Noble Truths, you yourself have to touch deeply the things that bring you peace and joy. When you do, you realize that walking on the earth is a real miracle. Washing dishes, your community and friends is a miracle. The greatest miracle is to be alive. We can put an end to our suffering just by realizing that our suffering is not worth suffering for. How many people kill themselves because of rage or despair? In that moment, they do not see the vast happiness that is available. Mindfulness puts an end to such a limited perspective. The Buddha faced his own suffering directly and discovered the path of liberation. Don't run away from things that are unpleasant in order to embrace things that are pleasant. Put your hands in the earth, face the difficulties, and grow new happiness. Okay. Like good organic gardeners, they do not discriminate in favor of the flowers or against the garbage or dung. They know how to transform garbage into flowers. Don't throw away your suffering, touch your suffering. Face it directly, and your joy will become deeper. You know that suffering and joy are both impermanent. Learn the art of cultivating joy. Practice like this, and you come to the third turning of the third noble truth and realization. Or not to. When you reach the stage, your joy is no longer fragile, it is true joy. The fourth noble truth is the way out of suffering. First, the doctor looks deeply into the nature of our suffering. Then she confirms that the removal of our pain is possible. She prescribes a way out. Practicing the first turning of the Four Noble Truths, we recognize the Eightfold Path: right view, right thinking, right speech, right action, livelihood, right diligence, right mindfulness, and concentration can lead us out of suffering, but we do not yet know how to practice it. Realization: by learning, reflecting, and practicing. As we learn, whether by reading, listening, or discussing, we need to be open so we can see ways to put what we learn into practice. If learning is not followed by reflecting and practicing, it is not true learning. Continuing, this is suffering. This suffering needs to be seen clearly. The roots of this suffering need to be clearly understood. I have seen this suffering. I have seen how it manifests. I have seen its content, its root. Okay, these are practices, not proclamations. When the monk Gavapati heard his fellow monks say, "Whoever sees suffering sees the making of suffering, the ending of suffering, and the path," he added, "With my own ears I have heard the Buddha say, Bhikkhus, whoever sees suffering sees the making of suffering, the ending of suffering, and the path that leads to the end of suffering. Whoever sees the making of suffering sees suffering, the end of suffering, and the path. Whoever sees the ending of the suffering sees suffering, the making of suffering, and the path. Whoever sees the path that leads to the end of suffering sees suffering, the making of suffering, and the ending of suffering." Interbeing is an important characteristic of all the Buddha's teaching. When you touch one, you touch all. May all love all. Okay, now last paragraph in this video. If we live according to the Noble Eightfold Path, we cultivate well-being, and our life will be filled with joy, ease, and wonder. But if our path is not noble, if there is craving, hatred, ignorance, and fear in the way we live our daily life, if we practice the ignoble Eightfold Path, suffering will naturally be the outcome. The practice is to face our suffering and transform it in order to bring about well-being. We need to study the Noble Eightfold Path and learn ways to put it into practice in our daily lives. Hope you enjoyed.